The hammer felt heavy in Nathan Cordwainer's calloused hands as he stared into the black mouth of the tunnel beneath his barn. September wind howled across the Colorado Territory, but down here, 30 feet below ground, the air hung still and thick with secrets. He'd been alone on this land for 3 years now, ever since Gettysburg took his leg and his faith in righteous causes. The 640 acres his grandfather Josiah left him had been sanctuary enough. Until today, until the rotting floorboards gave way and revealed this passage, hand-carved walls, fresh boot prints in the dust, and deeper in the darkness, the glint of something that shouldn't exist. Nathan struck a match, the flame dancing across stone walls that had witnessed things no God-fearing man should know. His grandfather's initials were carved deep into the support beam above his head, J.C. 1851. But Josiah Cordwainer had been a preacher, not a miner. So why was there silver dust still sparkling on these tunnel walls? The match burned down to his fingers. In the darkness that followed, Nathan Cordwainer would discover that some family legacies are written in blood, and some desires burn hotter than a Colorado wildfire. 3 days before, Nathan found the tunnel. She walked into Cedar Falls like a fever dream made flesh. Catalina Herrera moved through Murphy's General Store with the fluid grace of water over stone, her riding skirt clinging to curves that made honest men forget their prayers. Nathan watched from across the street, his morning coffee growing cold as she emerged into the autumn sunlight, that mass of dark hair catching fire in the golden light. You planning to stand there gawking all day? Or are you going to introduce yourself? Old Murphy called from his doorway, grinning like he knew something the rest of the world didn't. Nathan limped across the dusty street, his war-wounded legs stiff in the morning cold. Up close, she was even more dangerous. Olive skin that seemed to glow from within, and eyes the color of sage honey. She was examining his bay mare with the practiced touch of someone who knew horses better than most men knew themselves. "She's favoring her left foreleg," Catalina said, without looking up, her voice carrying the musical cadence of Spanish, mixed with frontier practicality. "Probably a stone bruise, but I could take a look if you'd like." "You a veterinarian, Miss Herrera, Catalina Herrera." She straightened, and Nathan caught the scent of lavender and leather, of woman and wilderness combined. "And I know enough about horses to help." Her eyes met his, and Nathan felt something shift inside his chest, something that had been locked away since the war. "I'm passing through, looking for work and information." She worked on his mare with hands that were gentle but sure, and when she bent over to examine the hoof, her white cotton blouse pulled tight across her back, revealing the curve of her waist, the promise of skin beneath. Nathan found himself studying the way her lips pursed in concentration, the small furrow between her brows when she was thinking. "What kind of information?" he heard himself ask. Catalina's hands stilled on the horse's leg. When she looked up, there was something darker in those honey eyes. Pain, maybe, or anger, carefully controlled. "I'm looking for someone who used to live around here, a man named Esteban Herrera. He was my grandfather." The name hit Nathan like a punch to the gut. He'd seen it before, carved into the same beam as his grandfather's initials. Down in that tunnel. Down in the dark, where secrets waited like wolves in winter. That night, Nathan couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Catalina's face, the way her breath had caught when their hands briefly touched passing the horse's lead rope. She'd accepted his invitation to stay the night. The nearest inn was 15 miles through country that wasn't safe for a woman traveling alone. Now she sat by his fireplace, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, wearing one of his clean shirts over her chemise. The white cotton fell to mid-thigh, and when she moved, he caught glimpses of smooth skin that made his throat go dry. "Tell me about your grandfather," she said, her voice soft in the firelight. "Josiah Cordwainer. I heard he was a preacher." Nathan settled into the chair across from her, keeping distance between them because proximity felt dangerous. "He was a fire and brimstone type, built the first church in Cedar Falls." He paused, studying her face. "Why do you ask?" Catalina's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup. "Because I think our grandfathers knew each other, and I think something terrible happened between them." The wood popped in the fireplace, sending sparks up the chimney. Nathan felt the weight of the tunnel's secret pressing down on him like a physical thing. "What makes you think that?" Instead of answering, Catalina stood and walked to the window, looking out at the moonlit landscape. The shirt rode up as she moved, revealing the curve of her hips, the long line of her legs. Nathan's pulse hammered in his throat. "My grandfather disappeared in 1852, she said finally. "He was a prospector, working a claim somewhere in this valley. The Mexican authorities said he probably just moved on, looking for better prospects. But my grandmother never believed that. She said he'd found something valuable, something worth staying for." She turned, and the firelight behind her made the shirt nearly transparent. Nathan could see the shadow of her body underneath, the swell of her breasts, the indent of her waist. His hands clenched on the arms of his chair. "Nathan," she said, and his name on her lips sounded like a prayer and a temptation. "What did you find today, when you were fixing the barn floor?" The question hung between them like a loaded gun. Nathan could lie, could protect the secret that had been buried for 35 years. Or he could trust this woman who had walked into his life like destiny made flesh. "Come with me," he said finally, standing. "But bring a lantern. And Catalina?" He paused in the doorway, drinking in the sight of her. Hair wild, shirt clinging to her curves, eyes bright with anticipation and something deeper. "Whatever we find down there, it changes everything." She moved toward him with that fluid grace, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her skin. "Some things need to be changed," she whispered, and when she passed him in the doorway, her body brushed against his, leaving him burning with want and the terrible certainty that he was about to step into darkness that would transform them both. The tunnel swallowed their lantern light like a hungry mouth. Catalina followed Nathan down the wooden steps, her hand trailing along the carefully hewn walls. The air smelled of earth and old secrets, of time and something else, something metallic that made her pulse quicken. "Jesus Christ," she breathed as their lights revealed the first chamber. It was a room carved from living rock, furnished with a bed, a table, chairs that spoke of long occupation. Nathan watched Catalina move through the space, her body casting dancing shadows on the walls. The way she bent to examine objects, the arch of her back, the fall of her hair across her face, every movement was unconscious poetry that made his blood run hot. "Someone lived here," she said, her voice hushed. "Recently." Nathan nodded toward a passage leading deeper into the earth. "There's more." The second chamber was larger, dominated by wooden crates and mining equipment. Nathan held his lantern high, revealing walls that glittered with veins of silver. Catalina gasped, her hands going to her throat. "My God, Nathan! This is it. This is what my grandfather found." But it was the third chamber that changed everything. Nathan's lantern illuminated a wooden desk, papers scattered across its surface, and an iron strongbox that sat open like a mouth confessing sins. Catalina moved to the desk with feline grace, her fingers trailing over documents that time had yellowed but not destroyed. Nathan watched the way concentration tightened her features, the way her teeth caught her lower lip as she read. "Partnership agreement," she murmured, dated August 1851, between Josiah Cordwainer, Thomas Blackwood, and— her voice broke— Esteban Herrera. Nathan moved behind her, close enough to smell the lavender in her hair, to feel the warmth of her body through the thin shirt. Looking over her shoulder, he could see the swell of her breasts, the rapid rise and fall of her breathing. "Keep reading," he said, his voice rough. Her hands trembled as she lifted the next document, a newspaper clipping from the Cedar Falls Gazette, September 1852. The headline made Nathan's blood go cold. "Mexican prospector missing. Foul play suspected." Catalina turned in his arms, and suddenly they were standing chest to chest, her face tilted up toward his. Tears glittered in her eyes like silver in the lantern light. "They killed him," she whispered. "Your grandfather and Thomas Blackwood. They murdered mine." Nathan's hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs brushing away tears that felt like liquid fire on her skin. "Catalina." "I know," she said, and her voice was steady despite the tears. "I know what this means. I know we shouldn't, that we can't." But her body was pressed against his, soft and warm and trembling with more than grief. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, even as her words pushed him away. "I came here to find the truth," she breathed against his throat. "But I never expected to find you." Nathan's control, already stretched thin, snapped like an overwound watch spring. His mouth came down on hers, fierce and hungry, tasting salt tears and something sweeter, desire that had been building like pressure in a mine shaft. She kissed him back with desperate intensity, her body arching against his as if trying to lose herself in sensation. Her hands found the buttons of his shirt, fingers working with practiced efficiency, born of sudden consuming need. "This is madness," she gasped against his mouth. "Then we're both mad," he replied, his hands sliding down to grip her hips, pulling her harder against the evidence of his want. The lantern light flickered around them as they sank to the blanket-covered floor, two people choosing passion over prudence, desire over duty. In a place where their grandfather's sins waited like patient ghosts, they made love on blankets that smelled of earth and secrets, in a chamber carved from stone and lined with silver that gleamed like watching eyes in the lantern light. Nathan's hands mapped the geography of Catalina's body, the curve of her waist, the hollow of her throat, the places that made her gasp and arch beneath him. She was fire and silk, responding to his touch with an abandon that left him breathless. Her skin was golden in the flickering light, unmarked save for a small scar just below her left breast, a crescent moon of white against warm bronze. "How did you get this?" he asked, tracing it with his fingertip. "A horse," she whispered, her back arching as his touch sent shivers through her. "When I was 16, I was trying to break a stallion that everyone said was impossible." Her breath caught as his mouth followed the path his finger had traced. "I should have listened to them." "I'm glad you didn't," Nathan murmured against her skin. "Stubborn women are my weakness." She laughed, low and rich, her hands tangling in his hair. "What else are your weaknesses, Nathan Cordwainer?" He looked up at her, taking in the sight of her sprawled beneath him. Hair fanned across the blanket like spilled ink, lips swollen from his kisses. "Right now? You. Only you." When they came together, it was with the desperate intensity of two people who knew this might be their only chance, their only moment of grace before the world intruded. She moved beneath him like water, like music, her soft cries echoing off the stone walls, as pleasure built between them, like summer lightning. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers combing through her hair. The lantern had burned low, casting their bodies in deep shadows and golden highlights. "I lied to you," Catalina said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's hand stilled in her hair. "About what?" She raised her head, meeting his eyes. In the low light, her face was all shadows and sharp angles, beautiful and terrible. "I'm not just passing through. I've been tracking this story for 2 years, ever since my grandmother died and left me a box of my grandfather's papers." A chill that had nothing to do with the underground air crept up Nathan's spine. "What papers?" Catalina sat up, unself-conscious in her nakedness, her breasts catching the lantern light as she reached for her saddlebags. She pulled out a leather portfolio, worn smooth with age and handling. "Letters from your grandfather," she said, spreading them across the blanket between them. "Threatening letters, telling my grandfather to abandon his claim or face consequences." Nathan's blood turned to ice as he read Josiah's familiar handwriting. "Your kind isn't welcome here, Herrera. Take what you can carry and go back to Mexico where you belong." "There's more," Catalina continued, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "A map showing this tunnel system, and this." She handed him a daguerreotype, 3 men standing in front of the barn above them. Nathan recognized his grandfather's stern face immediately. The other 2 were strangers, but their names were written on the back in Josiah's hand: Thomas Blackwood, Esteban Herrera. Partnership dissolved. August 1852. "The last letter is dated September 15th, 1852, Catalina said. 3 days before, the newspaper reported my grandfather missing." Nathan stared at the photograph, his grandfather's face looking back at him like an accusation. "Catalina, I didn't know." "I know you didn't." She touched his face gently, her thumb tracing his cheekbone. "That's what makes this so hard." "What do you mean?" Her smile was heartbreaking in its sadness. "I came here to expose the truth, to make the families who killed my grandfather pay for what they did." She gestured at the tunnel around them. "I knew about this place. I've been watching you for weeks, waiting for you to find it." The betrayal hit Nathan like a physical blow. "You used me." "At first," she admitted. "But Nathan, what just happened between us? That was real. That was—" She reached for him, but he pulled away, standing and reaching for his clothes. "Real." The word came out bitter as alkali water. "You seduced me to get access to my land, to this tunnel. I seduced you because I couldn't help myself," she said fiercely, rising to her knees. "Because from the moment I saw you, I wanted you. Because I'm falling in love with you despite everything I know I should feel." Nathan was still buttoning his shirt when the sound of footsteps echoed down the tunnel. Heavy boots, moving with purpose. He grabbed the rifle he'd left by the entrance, motioning for Catalina to stay back. "Too late for that," a voice called from the darkness. "I can hear you whispering down there, like mice in the walls." Theodore Blackwood stepped into the lantern light, and Nathan's blood went cold. He'd known Teddy all his life. They'd grown up together in Cedar Falls, played as boys in the creek that ran behind both their father's properties. But the man standing before them now wasn't the friend Nathan remembered. This man had the cold eyes of a killer, and the Winchester rifle in his hands was pointed directly at Catalina's chest. "Well, well," Teddy said, his gaze raking over Catalina's half-dressed form with disgusting appreciation. "Looks like the little Mexican whore finally found what she was looking for." Nathan stepped between them, his own rifle coming up. "Watch your mouth, Blackwood." "Or what?" Teddy laughed, but there was no humor in it. You'll defend your grandfather's killer? What are you talking about? Ask her, Teddy said, nodding toward Catalina. Ask her about the silver she's been stealing from this mine for the past 3 months. Ask her about the men she hired to clean out our family fortune while we trusted her to be just another drifter passing through. Nathan's heart hammered against his ribs. Is that true? Catalina had finished dressing, and now she stood tall and proud, her chin lifted defiantly. Every piece of silver that came out of this mine was paid for, with my grandfather's blood. I took what was rightfully mine. Your grandfather was a thief and a claim jumper, Teddy spat. My father and Josiah Cordwainer caught him trying to salt the mine with silver from other claims, make it look richer than it was, so he could sell it to investors back east. That's a lie, Catalina said. Is it? Teddy pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket. This is a confession Esteban Herrera signed before he died, admitting to fraud, to theft, to conspiracy. Nathan took the paper with hands that shook slightly. The writing was shaky, desperate, but it was clearly signed by Esteban Herrera. His confession detailed a scheme to inflate the mine's value, to cheat investors, to use the partnership with Blackwood and Cordwainer as a front for criminal activity. They tortured him, Catalina said quietly, made him sign whatever they wanted before they put a bullet in his head. He died of fever, Teddy replied. Natural causes. We have a death certificate. Forged, no doubt. Catalina's voice was steady, but Nathan could see the tremor in her hands. Just like everything else your families built their fortunes on. Nathan stared at the confession, trying to reconcile it with the woman he'd just made love to, the woman he was falling for, despite everything. Catalina, tell me the truth. All of it. She met his eyes, and he saw something break behind her gaze. The truth is that I don't know anymore. I've spent so long believing one version of the story that I can't tell what's real and what's just what I need to believe. Here's what's real, Teddy said, cocking his rifle. You're both trespassing on Blackwood property. And trespassers in the Colorado Territory have a way of disappearing, permanent-like. The threat hung in the air, like gunpowder smoke. Nathan felt the familiar tightness in his chest that had haunted him since Gettysburg, the knowledge that violence was coming, inevitable as winter, and that he would have to choose who lived and who died. But this time, the choice was already made. Whatever the truth about their grandfathers, whatever lies had been told and retold, Nathan knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not let anyone hurt Catalina Herrera, not while he still drew breath. There's one more room, Catalina said suddenly, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Deeper in the mine. That's where the real truth is buried. Teddy's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? You want to know what really happened to my grandfather? What your father and Josiah Cordwainer really did down here? She gestured toward a passage Nathan hadn't noticed before, hidden behind mining equipment. It's all there. Everything. Nathan kept his rifle trained on Teddy as they moved deeper into the tunnels, following Catalina's lead. The passage narrowed, forcing them to walk single file. The air grew thicker, heavy with the smell of decay, and something else, something that made Nathan's war-trained instincts scream danger. The final chamber was smaller than the others, and Nathan understood immediately why Catalina had saved it for last. In the center of the room, partially covered by rotting canvas, lay human remains. But these weren't the neat bones of natural death. The skull showed a clear bullet hole, and the skeleton's hands were bound behind its back with rope that had somehow survived the decades. Jesus, Teddy breathed, his rifle wavering. Esteban Herrera, Catalina said quietly. My grandfather, executed like a criminal and buried in secret. She knelt beside the remains, her voice breaking. They didn't just kill him for the mine, Teddy. They killed him because he was going to expose what the mine really was. What do you mean? Nathan asked. Catalina stood, holding a metal box that had been hidden beneath the canvas. Inside were more documents, official papers bearing government seals, correspondence with territorial officials, and maps showing the true extent of the silver deposits. This isn't just a mine, she said. It's sitting on the largest silver deposit in Colorado territory, worth millions, maybe tens of millions. Your grandfathers weren't just claim jumpers or petty thieves. They were planning to steal from the federal government. The papers told a story of systematic fraud. Josiah Cordwainer and Thomas Blackwood had been filing false reports with the territorial government, claiming the mine was played out while secretly extracting massive quantities of silver. Esteban Herrera had discovered their scheme and threatened to expose them. So they killed him, Nathan said, the pieces finally falling into place. And split the proceeds between them. Catalina nodded. Used the money to buy respectability, to build their legacies in Cedar Falls. The church your grandfather built? The bank Blackwood founded. All of it paid for with blood money. Teddy's face had gone pale as parchment. This can't be right. Your father left a diary, Catalina said gently. Hidden in his study. I found it 2 months ago. She pulled out a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Thomas Blackwood's handwriting. He wrote about the guilt, about the nightmares, about how he could never tell anyone what really happened down here. Nathan read over her shoulder, his grandfather's crimes laid out in black and white, the cold-blooded execution, the cover-up, the years of living with blood on their hands. What do we do now? He asked. Catalina looked at him with eyes full of pain and something that might have been hope. We make it right. 6 months later, Nathan stood in the Cedar Falls Cemetery, watching as they lowered a proper coffin into consecrated ground. The headstone was simple granite, but the words carved into it told the truth at last. Esteban Herrera, beloved husband and father. Justice delayed is not justice. Denied. Catalina stood beside him, her hand warm in his despite the Colorado spring chill. She wore black silk that moved like water in the wind, and when she looked at him, he saw forgiveness and something deeper, a love that had survived betrayal, lies, and the weight of family sins. It's finished, she said quietly. Nathan nodded. They'd turned the evidence over to the territorial marshal, exposing the truth about the mine and their grandfather's crimes. The silver would go to the federal government, as it should have 40 years ago. Teddy Blackwood had fled to California rather than face charges. The Cordwainer and Blackwood fortunes, built on blood money, would be seized and used to build schools and hospitals for the territory's growing population. Nathan had lost everything his family owned, but gained something more valuable than silver or land. He'd found a woman who could look at him and see not his grandfather's sins, but the man he chose to be. No, he said, pulling Catalina closer. It's beginning. She smiled then, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her since that night in the tunnel. What's beginning? The rest of our lives, he said, and kissed her there in the shadow of truth finally told. In the end, some legacies are worth more than gold or silver. They're worth the courage to choose love over hatred, justice over revenge, and hope over the bitter weight of the past. Want to hear more stories of love, loss, and redemption from the American frontier? Hit that like button and subscribe for tales of the human heart, tested by the harsh beauty of the West. And tell us in the comments, where are you listening from? These stories belong to all of us, wherever we call home.